Earlier this year, I shot a wedding on Nikon Z50. It's an APS-C vlogger style camera. So I'm going to walk through how it held up. Starting with the gear, obviously I had the Nikon Z50. I had 2 batteries. I also had the Nikkor 28-75 f2.8. The lens is very sharp if you stop down to f4. Next, I used the DJI Ronin RS3 Mini. This gimbal was very nice to have because it was so light compared to the other models that I didn't have much fatigue throughout the day. Although there are drawbacks, it is slightly shakier than other DJI models I've used in the past, but it still performed very well. It ended the day around 40% battery. That was also sleeping and turning it off as often as I could. For audio, I used the Hollyland Lark Mark I. It's similar to the Rode Go mics you've probably seen, but they're much smaller and their price reflects that. It honestly had great audio quality and it never dropped. I also used a K&F ND filter. This allowed me to keep my shutter speed low while not having to stop down an excessive amount. Altogether, the equipment cost just shy of $1,300. So it was a full wedding. I covered from getting ready all the way to the end of the reception. I did shoot at 1080-60. The whole time I was using the flat profile that's already inside the camera. I did adjust it though. I noticed that typically the whole day I was shooting anywhere from 35mm to 50mm. And sometimes during the ceremony or very up close shots, I was shooting at 75mm. And the first camera battery was around 25% by the time the ceremony began. So I swapped it out and had a completely fresh battery for the ceremony. Keep in mind, I was turning the camera off as often as I could, and that's also in power saving mode and airplane mode. Though during the best man speech during the reception, I was caught off guard a little bit, and what I had to do was clip the Lark mic awkwardly on the gimbal somehow, and it was kind of pointed downward. So I messed up the audio there a little bit. It was recoverable, but I did have to put in work. And in that instance, a shotgun mic definitely would have been preferable, but it's okay. And once again, into the nighttime, the camera and lens performed pretty well in the low light situations. Not as much grain as you may expect. At the end of the day, the footage took up about 10 gigabytes of storage. The image quality was very good at 1080, however, not as good as the Z50 can do at 4K. And I originally avoided shooting at 4K for the entire day because of battery concerns. While I did shoot at 1080-60, I did export at 1080-30. This allowed me to slow down the footage a little bit to get that nice flowing shots that you expect from a wedding video. Going forward, I would definitely recommend shooting at 1080-30 and slowing it down that same 80% to 24 frames a second and exporting at 24 frames per second. That way it would divide it evenly. If you do that, you just have to be mindful of the shots you know you're going to slow down and shots you know you want it. So for the ceremony, you know you want to slow that down because you want to sync the sound to their lips. But for all the B-roll and shots, you definitely want to slow that down. While editing, most of the footage had warp stabilizer applied to it, although it was at about 8% most of the time. I didn't want to destroy the footage and having too much warping to try to keep it steady. I was okay with the handheld look because I was using a gimbal, so it was already pretty smooth to begin with. But 8% warp stabilizer just helped it get that nice, smoother quality. It makes it seem like a heftier camera rig. Now going forward, I definitely recommend 4K 30 for a lot of that B-roll shots like I mentioned, that you know you're going to slow down, and exporting it at 24 frames a second. That way, when you slow it down by 80%, all the frames line up perfectly while you're exporting. Although you can shoot a wedding with just one camera, it would be much more beneficial to have 2 cameras. This can save you in case there's a malfunction with one of the cameras. And since you have one camera rolling on a tripod the whole time, that makes your mobile setup just a cutaway angle, something to make the edit more interesting. You're not relying on that to do all the work. It takes a lot less stress off you while you're recording. Just be mindful of where the tripod obviously is. Don't get in the way. This is also where a shotgun mic would be very useful, sitting on that stationary tripod camera, because you know you're not going to be moving around. And the reason I say that you should have the shotgun mic on a tripod camera rather than the mobile camera is because when you spin on the mobile camera, that shotgun mic is going to change where it's getting audio from. So if you have it on that stationary camera, it's going to be directed exactly where you want it at all times. It's going to be more consistent audio than if you had it on the mobile device. Finally, for that tripod camera, do make sure to have auto white balance, auto focus, and stabilization off, because that ensures it'll save the battery on those long ceremonies, which also means if you're not using any autofocus or stabilization, you can use older manual focus lenses like these. And I would definitely recommend buying the 2-pack of any mic brand you buy. This way you can put one mic on either partner. For my setup, I had to put the microphone on the priest, which worked fine. However, I did notice that he was significantly louder than the couple, So I had to bounce the audio back and forth, back and forth. It wasn't very fun, but it did work. Although the flat profile definitely helped with editing, it is still 8-bit video, so you don't have that much room to work with, but you can download custom image profiles off the internet for free and apply them to your video or photos. And going forward, there's one that's called JLog, and I really enjoy using it. And again, it makes it more of a flat profile, but it's still 8-bit video, so you're not getting that much range out of it, but you're getting much more than if you use the, I think it's called natural picture profile from Nikon, and you're still getting more even if you use the flat picture profile from Nikon. So using those free picture profiles that people have made in the community on your camera can really save you and can really save highlights on people's faces. I do very much like the lens that I used. It's a good range with focal length. The maximum aperture was very good for what I was doing indoors and outdoors. Personally, I do like the look that gimbals give the footage, and I do think it is very appropriate for weddings. There is a time and place for handheld, though I don't think weddings are quite it, at least not with a camera this light, because it gets very shaky very fast. With the gimbal, it's still obviously handheld, it's not on a tripod, but you have a bit of a more fluid look other than just handheld. And since then, I've bought a sling handle from Small Rig. It was about $35, and it significantly improved the ergonomics of the gimbal. I definitely recommend grabbing it if you're going to do a lot of gimbal work. Finally, I wasn't scared how the Z50 would perform. I trust this camera. I've used it for about a year now, and it's given me very good results. I have no plans in switching this camera out anytime soon, even if I purchase a new camera. Again, for that second shot for the weddings would be really nice. I would still definitely keep this camera. It can do very good work, especially for the price. Lastly, what have you shot on the Z50? I don't see this camera talked about very often on the internet, and when I do, people normally have mixed feelings about it. So what have you created with it? And did you use the kit lens? Because that's often a comment I see amongst people who didn't really like this camera. I think once you give it the chance, it can perform very well.